Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Anier-Goldum. Now, as you might have heard, this year's Nigerian Economic Summit, featuring discussions around the Nigerian economy, is underway. Its aim is to come up with policies, partnerships, and suggested actions that the organizers hope will result in real, sustainable, and inclusive growth for Nigeria. But like the 30 other summits before it, this is the 31st, the NESG can only hope that it won't be business as usual this year because of the uniqueness of things not just in Nigeria but around the world. For a start, there's the Tinubu reforms, which have been described as bold, but whose positive effects are yet to be felt by ordinary Nigerians. Food prices are still shooting through the roof, and the country has incurred a biting debt burden on top of the crippling unemployment and poverty levels and withering insecurity. So given all that, what is the summit aiming to come up with this year as the best way to rescue Nigeria as it faces not only the challenges that we've just mentioned, but additionally corruption, nepotism, and problems of leadership at all levels?
I'm to office fully aware that the secret to a successful federation lies in empowering each federating unit with the resources and autonomy to pursue development peculiar to its needs. This is why we increase the state's monthly allocations, giving them room to fund critical projects and social interventions. Simultaneously, our commitment to redeeming our industrial and infrastructural deficits has enhanced productivity across sectors. We are now producing an average of 1.8 million barrels of oil per day, and are working towards achieving 2 million barrels per day by the end of the 2025 fiscal year.
Approximately 28 months ago, the current administration has been implementing bold, courageous reforms aimed at reforming the economy, enhancing productivity, enhancing fiscal space, and addressing insecurity as captured in the renewed Hope agenda, as well as the 8 priority areas of the agenda.
The government has taken courageous steps. The removal of the fuel subsidies, the unification of foreign exchange markets, tax reforms, amongst others. These are reforms that demanded huge courage and immense political will. Yet, we must also acknowledge that millions of Nigerians are carrying the weight of these changes.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the former chairman of the board of directors of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Bukar, who was also at one point the MD and CEO of the Central Securities Depository of the Nigerian capital markets, and is currently heading a clutch of other businesses, including the Africa operations of Inlax, the banking and e-payment firm. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Charles.
So a good day.
Yes, it is indeed. The opening plenary was quite riveting. Those sessions basically put in place what it means for a nation to have what I call a very bold reform. Even though at the time that Mr. President announced the fuel subsidy removal, I think it took a lot of courage to stay the course. And for a nation like Nigeria, where intentions expressed are never actualized, this is a situation where fire first before you even aim. And of course, naturally, the 3 or so fundamental reforms are all the right things from the point of view of an economist, from the point of view of any policy person that looks at an economy like Nigeria's and say, what should we do to kickstart a growth trajectory for Nigeria?
And certainly from the point of view of the NESG.
Exactly.
That is something you've been calling for many,
years.
many years.
Yes, it had never come to pass. We do a little bit of this and that and never cross that hurdle. And this administration has done it. of course, naturally, it comes with a lot of challenges. And those challenges, in addition to some of the other global macro factors, have exacerbated situation for the average citizen.
Well, let me see if this description fits what you're talking about. Because to quote a headline from Business Day newspaper, Nigeria's economy is turning the corner, but the citizens are still trapped in hardship. Is that the message that's also coming from the NESG today?
There has been an acknowledgement, especially when the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group made his presentation, as well as the Minister for National Planning, Atiku Bagudu. In all instances, there is an acknowledgement that there is hardship, but things have been turning around. And that turning around component is where a lot of effort needs to be in. For example, inflation has been reducing, albeit very slowly. 1.2% reduction doesn't translate into a cheaper lifestyle for the average citizen, but it is going in the right direction. Trend is a friend if it is going in the right direction.
However, the many economists, and you are of course in that sort of area, say that income gaps remain, and that erases macroeconomic progress, and that stagnant wages are neutralizing that cooling inflation that you're talking about. And yet the president insists that there is a bright light at the end of the tunnel. Is he right?
Exactly. In fact, one of the key things about this transformation of this sort is that it does come with disruption. And those disruptions include the hardship that these reforms have brought to the nation. Now, we can then talk about what could have taken place to exacerbate the situation vis-a-vis the most vulnerable of citizens. And that had not yet been fully articulated, even though we've seen the humanitarian side of things. But usually what happens is that if you combine that with technology and make sure that the right people get what is needed to uplift them, not necessarily by giving handouts per se, even if it is vouchers of some kind where there is an exchange of economic values, it would help. But having said that, the most important component is that the uncertainty by an investor, be that investor local or foreign, is gone.
Or previously, it's gone or it's going?
It's gone because what has happened is that we have seen stability of the Naira since the devaluation. Stability brings confidence. Confidence brings investors, both local and international. And that means that the Naira would actually begin to look stronger. And if on that there is catalytic investments by government on some of the basic fundamental infrastructural elements of the economy, then what happens is that our non-oil exports go up, which it has. Data has shown that for the first time, Nigeria is exporting more non-oil goods and services than oil. To me, those are the specks of lights, or the bright lights, or the spots that would basically say that the economy is going in the right direction.
And that is an important thing, coming from somebody like yourself, who has been very consistent and very objective in your analysis of Nigerian economy without fear or favor to anybody. It sounds like your confidence as both an economist, a business-minded person, is high, and that as far as you believe, the worst is over. Is that a fair assessment?
Indeed. What I have seen and heard outside of Nigeria, I mean, in the last few weeks, I've been to about 3 or 4 different countries, different fora, and in almost all instances, people bring up the reforms. Unprovoked. We were not selling Nigeria per se, but they are bringing in and saying, how are things looking now?
Right.
So what can we do? How can we be involved? Now, those are signs that, those signs are basically the stage where the nation needs to begin to market itself. Now, you know, as I say, stability brings confidence.
But you know the problem,
Right.
Mr. Chiari, is the fact that when you go out, I mean, you're obviously well placed. I mean, you're an economist, you crunch numbers, you assess what is going on, trends, as you said, and so on. But the majority of Nigerians are not on that level. They're not number crunchers. They don't sort of sit in, and I'm not trying to sort of, you know, downgrade the importance of what you're doing, because I mean that is critical.
Right.
That's what helps to instill confidence internationally. Right. But I mean, when you go out on the streets of Nigeria's cities and towns and villages, there is no sigh of relief. In fact, far from it, household living conditions seem to be worsening, and there's no consensus in the economic world. One economic analyst was saying that disinflation, which means slowing inflation, is not the same as deflation. In other words, prices are still going up, but not as quickly as before. So while the rate of increase is moderating, prices themselves have not declined.
I think I would have a disagreement there. You know, when inflation is going down, but slowly, it's one thing. It's not that inflation is rising slowly. There is a difference between the rate of change, which is the second differential equation of the inflationary force. So it's like a car driving, and it's going from 60 miles an hour down to 50 miles an hour. That means that it's slowing down. Whereas if the car were going at 10 miles an hour and then the next thing you see is it has moved to 15, that means that inflation has gone up by 50%.
Yeah, but
so the rate of change
Sure.
is positive in the good sense of the word.
But can I make this point?
Yes.
Because what they're saying is that the consumer price index has continued to climb, reflecting that the cost of goods and services is still going up. So for
Correct.
instance, a bag of rice, and that's what the ordinary man on the street understands, man and woman, a bag of rice was 28,000 naira in 2020. Then it went up to 120,000 naira in 2024, and now it's at 80,000 naira.
Or 50 or whatever.
Well, 80,000.
Yeah.
A bag of gari was 13,500 naira in 2020. Then it rose to 38,000 in 2024 and is now at 25,000 naira. And you could say the same for petrol costs, which has a knock-on effect on transport. So, I mean, if somebody's wage is stagnant, and everybody agrees that wages have remained stagnant, and then the naira has been devalued, and you've suddenly gone from, you know, maybe 20,000 to 120,000 down to 80,000.
Sure.
I mean, the person's life has got considerably worse, hasn't it?
Oh, indeed. In fact, what has happened with the policy pronouncement of removing subsidy, it basically means, and the inflationary force that came in, plus the devaluation. Devaluation of currency in any economy means that all of us are going to be poorer than we were pre-devaluation. Now, what happens then is the export of goods and services becomes cheaper. Now, unfortunately for us, the commodity that we export most is oil and gas. And the prices of those commodities do not change per se, I mean, except for those minor fluctuations on a daily basis. But the dollar component that we receive would not change. It's the equivalent of it in Naira that changes. Now, the focus then would be on manufactured goods and services and non-oil exports. Those products will be more competitive. And I know of some people who are exporting other things other than oil and gas, whose returns have been fantastic because they are now positioned more competitively. Unfortunately, for some of them, because of the difficulty, especially of agricultural goods, they have to smuggle it out to Ghana or some other place before they export it, which is a sad commentary on our ports and port reforms, which need to happen so that export becomes frictionless, or less friction, or lesser friction than we have currently, enjoying, if that's the word to be used. Now, those are all factors that add to the gross domestic product of a nation. And certainly that means that the GDP of Nigeria would go up. And indeed, if you look at the NBS, it has. A year ago, our GDP was somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 billion. This last year, it was $320-something billion. So it has gone up by somewhere in the order of 4 or 5%. Now, unfortunately, that kind of growth would not make us hit the 1 trillion economy by 2030. Now, it's nice to have a daring, crazy goal as a nation, if you are a visionary, right? But to achieve that, you need double-digit growth.
Right.
And we are not yet there.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time. So let's just be summarizing things. Inflation still astronomically high at more than 20%.
Right.
In Europe, when it was half that level, people took to the streets. So relief from that point of view is a phantom at the moment in this country. Some economists, I don't know if you agree with them, have suggested that inflation will need to come down to something like 12% before people begin to feel the impact in this country. Given all that, what is the NASG going to say to the government at this year's economic summit? What would you say? I mean, scale up protection, social protection, strengthen agriculture, provide soft loans and tax exemptions for small and medium-sized enterprises, or something else?
Many recommendations will come out of the various policy commissions, because the breakout sessions would actually end up crystallizing those recommendations into papers that would come into the Federal Executive Council. And what is going to happen is that, of course, we're not an isolated nation. We pick some of these examples from similar economies or economies that have tried and tested some of these policies.
Right. We've got about 20 seconds, sorry.
We need to make those recommendations, including the execution of those policies that would be recommended. Because gone are the days when NESG just makes a recommendation and holds its arm and let the government execute. Today, we also assist in helping in execution.
That's very
of those
encouraging,
policy frameworks.
because the NESG is made up of some of the best economic minds in Africa. So I'm encouraged by that.
Indeed.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Kyari Bukar was the former chairman of the board of directors of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. He was also the former MD and CEO of the Central Securities Depository of the Nigerian Capital Markets. He's currently the head of many businesses, including the Africa operations of Inlax, the banking and e-payment firm. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you again.